I'll go and deliver. Oh, and I crashed into a wall. Oops.
Shields up, Ironbreakers. Rurikhan here, coming at you with another edition of the Khans Cast. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a deep dive into Anthem's combo system. Now, I'm also currently working on another Anthem video that is going to involve equipment and loot and gear progression and all of that stuff. So if you want to make sure that you're not going to miss out on that, hit subscribe button and then hit the notification bell so that you'll actually be notified whenever I put out a new Anthem video. But anyway, let's get started, shall we? Now, the notion of combos in Anthem is going to involve you using a combination of certain Javelin abilities in order to trigger special effects that will debuff, incapacitate, or deal massive damage to your enemies. And the interesting thing about these combos is that it's going to allow you to coordinate with your friends in order to achieve builds that synergize your Javelin and your gear with everyone else's Javelin and gear that you have available at that time, and optimize that in order to achieve really interesting and powerful group dynamic. Now, you guys know that I love working up all kinds of different builds. I mean, if you guys have seen any of my Monster Hunter World work, you know that I just like, okay, I'm gonna pick out this piece of armor and combine it with this weapon and then put this gem there and do this thing, and that's gonna be really effective for dealing with this particular enemy. I'm just a sucker for figuring out that puzzle. And when it comes to Anthem, the potential for group builds that are going to specialize in different things is enormous, particularly when you start factoring in masterwork and potentially even legendary gear. And I say potentially legendary because I personally haven't seen that much about legendary gear. I mean, I'm gonna get more in depth with this when I get to the equipment video, but just know that even masterwork gear and legendary gear is going to be very important when it comes to dealing with combos, because certain gear is going to be able to do prime effects, which we'll talk more about that. I'm just getting ahead of myself at this point. So let's talk about the very most basic mechanics of combos. So certain Javelin skills are going to be able to prime your targets with an elemental debuff. Not all skills are going to do this, but some skills will be able to prime your targets. Now, the prime targets can then be detonated with other Javelin skills, which are detonators. So certain skills in your Javelin are going to be primers, other skills in your Javelin are going to be detonators. And the key is going to be you priming up your target and then detonating the prime target in order to achieve a combo. Now, this combo effect is going to change based on the element that you used to prime the target and the Javelin that is going to detonate the combo. I know, it sounds kind of weird, so let's just take a look at a couple of basic examples. So right here, you have a combo between a Storm's Ball Lightning ability and the Colossus Railgun.
I feel a little bad for making fun of Catherine earlier, so let's see if we can have her set up a combo up ahead. Nice combo.
The next example is a Ranger using a Frost Grenade, which will then combo off of the Colossus Multi-Mortar skill.
Alright, we can see the Rangers hovering in the top left, getting ready to do something. Looks like it might be, yep, Frost Grenade out. Jen's gonna use her Multi-Mortar for a big shatter combo. Alright, good job, Jen.
Now, there's plenty more examples of combos that have been shown throughout live streams and whatnot, but you guys get the basic idea. It's basically use a certain skill to prime a target and then use another skill to detonate that skill. So the first thing that is important for you to understand is that according to what I've seen in the live streams and what the devs have been saying throughout social media, priming is not just something that you're going to be doing willy-nilly, because certain enemies are going to be resilient to certain elements. So like, for instance, you might have a specific enemy that is like enchanted with fire or something like that, and therefore he's going to be more resilient with fire. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't prime him with fire, but it is going to take a lot more effort to achieve that than enemies that are not resilient to fire. And not just that, but also higher level enemies will just naturally be harder for you to prime, so it's going to take more usage of the skills that actually prime that target. And particularly, you might even have like two different Javelins using the same element to prime a target. That might make things go a little bit faster. And naturally, bosses should also be expected to be harder to prime for combos. Now, this again means it's going to be super important for you to optimize your build builds for higher level difficulties in order to achieve the best results. Like, you don't want to go into a layer into a stronghold that is full of enemies that are resilient to electric, and you're taking a bunch of javelins that are all kitted out with electric or lightning priming skills. You know, it's not going to work out all that well for you. So you might want to take something else, like maybe javelins that have acid skills equipped in order to deal additional damage, or fire skills equipped in order to deal damage over time. So let's actually take a look at the different elements and the combo effects that these elements are going to have. So if you happen to prime a target with fire, you're also going to be applying a damage over time effect on your primed target. If you debuff an enemy with acid, you're going to apply a debuff that increases all damage taken on the target that was primed. If you prime a target with frost, that target is going to be frozen in place, which means that is one of the more useful ones in my opinion, because everybody can just start taking pot shots at it before actually detonating the primed effect. And if you prime a target with lightning, it is going to cause that target to do an AoE pulse, which damages all enemies around the target. Besides all the special effects that the elements have on your enemies, it is also important to mention that lightning and frost are stronger against enemy shields, and acid and fire are stronger against enemy armor. So this is another one of those things that you have to keep in mind when you are figuring out what skills you're going to take and what content you're going to be doing. Now, next, let's look at what each javelin's detonation is going to affect on the combo itself. So if you happen to detonate a particular prime target with a ranger, the ranger is going to deal critical damage to the detonated enemy. That means that he is going to be dealing more single target damage, which seems that the ranger is all about single target damage from what I can see. Now, can he AoE? Sure, he can still AoE, but he seems more focused on single target from what I can tell. Now, the Colossus, if you happen to detonate prime targets with the Colossus, it is going to basically cause the detonated enemies to explode and deal AoE damage to all the enemies around them. So the Colossus is good at dealing massive amounts of AoE damage, so this kind of goes in line with that. Now, if you detonate an ability with Storm, this is actually an interesting one, and I'm not 100% sure of how it works, but what their description is that it spreads the elemental effect to nearby enemies. So I'm assuming this builds up the prime effect again. So basically, you'll be able to prime targets, and then if you detonate it using Storm, you'll be able to prime even more targets following that, which actually seems really interesting. But basically, do remember that the whole priming thing is going to be something that you will most likely have to build up. Like, I'm sure that the first application of prime is going to be fairly easy, but after you detonate a combo, I think it's going to get continuously harder for you to just prime, detonate, because otherwise it would make the game a little bit too easy. And also remember that certain enemies will have resiliences and all that stuff. The Interceptor is also another interesting one, which is whenever the Interceptor detonates a prime target, he is going to gain an aura, which basically causes enemies near it to gain the elemental effect over time. You guys are like, what the hell does that even mean? I think that the easiest way to explain the Interceptor is, say for instance, you detonate a frost target, you would get something similar to like an AoE area of effect that would slow enemies down and prime them for more freezing, okay? And that is kind of like how it works. So basically, depending on the combos that you do, so say for instance, you might have someone that applies an acid debuff on a target, and then say the Interceptor detonates that. That means that the Interceptor will be applying acid priming to everyone that is close to him for a short while. And you can see that this basically plays to the strengths of each of these javelins. So the Ranger focuses on dealing single target damage, Colossus focuses on dealing AoE damage, Storm focuses on spreading the priming effect and just priming targets in general, and the Interceptor focuses more on a melee style type of action, which basically, once you get that aura, if you're in melee range, you're basically constantly reapplying more priming onto your targets. And the variety that you get with these playstyles, I think, is very, very interesting. So basically, at this point, we can actually look at this chart by Reddit user FireDragon4, which includes most, if not all, of the currently known abilities that Javelins can do. And this should give you a pretty good idea of just how much variety you will find in playstyle, depending on what Javelin you're using, what Javelin your friends are using, and how interesting it's going to be to combine all of those things into a build for your whole group to just figure out, okay, I'm gonna take Acid Primer, and you can take, like, I don't know, Frost Primer, and then we can combine that with my explosions in this Javelin. That kind of stuff is just very, very interesting. Now, I don't know if all of the abilities are in this chart, but either way, it gives you a pretty good idea of what to expect. And the interesting thing is that you have to remember that for all of the abilities that you see on this chart, with the exception of the melee and ultimate attacks, because those are pretty much fixed in place, like the Colossus melee attack is always the same, Colossus ultimate attack is always the same thing for all of the other Javelins, but with the exception of melee and ultimate attacks, every single one of those abilities is a piece of gear, which means it is going to bring with it its own modifiers. It's going to bring with it its own potential from being a legendary item that might have unique effects when you actually do the ability itself, or it might have unique effects for other abilities that you have at your disposal. And it's just like, when you think of it like that, it is completely insane. And the fact that it is a piece of gear, it's not like you can just say, okay, I want to have the acid bomb on the interceptor, I want to have the lightning strike on Storm or something like that, because it's going to depend on whether or not your friends have the gear that gives them that specific ability. But at the same time, being able to adapt your builds around the gear that you have available to you, around the gear that your friends have available to them, and just me wrapping my brain around all of those variables in order to come up with something that is going to be optimal in, like, maximum difficulty on a stronghold is just something that I find particularly appealing. Maybe that's just me, I don't know, but I'm really curious to hear from you. What do you guys think about all this? What do you think about the combo system in Anthem? Are you excited about it? Are you not excited about it? Do you think it is going to be not as much of a big deal as I made it out to be in this video? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you very much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember, hit it up with a like, and I'll see you in the next one.